The thing about interstellar diplomacy, and really, someone should have mentioned this during Earth's admission interview, is that approximately 94% of advanced civilizations find physical contact somewhere between mildly offensive and grounds for planetary annihilation. The Galactic Consortium, that magnificent collection of 847 star systems who'd managed not to obliterate each other for the past 6,000 years, had built their entire social framework on a simple principle: keep your appendages to yourself. Humans, as it turned out, had not received this memo. Or rather, they'd received it, skimmed it during the orientation packet, and promptly forgotten it in favor of their bizarre compulsion to touch absolutely everything. Handshakes, high fives, fist bumps, back pats, shoulder squeezes. The species was a walking harassment lawsuit waiting to happen. The consortium had debated Earth's membership for 3 standard years before finally deciding that humanity's knack for creative problem-solving outweighed their tendency to hug colleagues during emotional moments. It was a decision several ambassadors were currently regretting. The Helix 9 research station orbited a neutron star in the Kepler 442 system, a joint scientific venture housing 237 beings from 43 different species. The station itself was a marvel of collaborative engineering, rotating habitat rings for gravity-preferring species, zero-G sectors for those who found floors philosophically offensive, and 16 different atmospheric zones, because apparently nobody could agree on what constituted breathable air. The cafeteria, located in the station's central hub, represented neutral ground where everyone could gather regardless of their biological requirements. The food was universally terrible, which somehow made it fair. Marcus Chen had been stationed on Helix 9 for 8 months, working as a maintenance technician in the Environmental Systems department. At 29 standard Earth years, he possessed exactly 3 notable qualities: an engineering degree from MIT, an almost supernatural ability to fix things by hitting them at precisely the right angle, and the critical thinking skills of a golden retriever who'd just spotted a tennis ball. His personnel file contained 14 minor infractions, including an incident where he'd tried to teach a Valorian diplomat how to do a skateboard kickflip in the zero-G recreation sector. The Valorian, who possessed a crystalline exoskeleton and no concept of wheeled transportation, had not been amused. Marcus's mother had always said he'd be the death of her. She'd meant it metaphorically. The universe was about to take it literally. The catastrophe began, as most catastrophes do, with good intentions and spectacular ignorance. Marcus had finished his shift early, after successfully repairing an air filtration unit that 3 other technicians had declared unsalvageable. He was feeling pretty good about himself, riding that particular high that comes from professional competence, which is exactly when the universe likes to remind you that hubris is a dish best served with immediate consequences. Lieutenant Kira Vex entered the cafeteria at 1,400 hours station time, as was her habit. She was Zytharian, which meant she stood roughly 7 feet tall, possessed 4 arms arranged in a symmetrical pattern, and had an exoskeleton that shimmered with deep blue and purple iridescence under the station's lighting. Her species had evolved on a high-gravity world where the food chain resembled a death metal album cover, and it showed. Everything about Zytharians suggested lethality: the chitinous plates that could deflect small arms fire, the retractable claws, the sensory antennae that could detect movement in a 50-meter radius, and the cultural obsession with personal honor that made Klingons look like conflict-avoidant pacifists. Kira had served in the Zytharian Defense Fleet for 12 years, before accepting a position as security chief on Helix 9. Her service record included 2 commendations for valor, one for single-handedly repelling a pirate boarding action, and a note about her tendency to solve problems by hitting them until they stopped being problems. She was respected, feared, and generally given a wide berth by anyone with functional survival instincts. Marcus saw her approaching a table near the viewing ports, carrying a tray loaded with something that looked like crystallized proteins suspended in nutrient gel. He was sitting 3 tables away, finishing something the cafeteria optimistically called a sandwich. In his defense, and there really wasn't much defense, what happened next occurred because of a perfect storm of boredom, cross-cultural ignorance, and the kind of impulse control that evolution usually weeds out within a generation. He saw the chair. He saw Kira approaching it, her attention focused on balancing her tray. And somewhere in Marcus's brain, in the part that should have been labeled "This is how you die," a thought formed: wouldn't it be hilarious to pull the chair away? Back on Earth, this was a classic prank. Juvenile, sure, potentially mean-spirited, absolutely, but ultimately harmless in a species that had 2 legs and a relatively low center of gravity. Marcus had done it to his roommate in college approximately 47 times. His roommate had retaliated by filling Marcus's shoes with shaving cream. Everyone laughed. Nobody died. This was normal human interaction. Zytharians, it should be noted, had 4 legs arranged in a rectangular configuration and a cultural context where furniture-based practical jokes translated to something entirely different. Marcus moved with the confidence of someone who'd made terrible decisions before and survived them. He stood, walked casually past Kira's table, and in one smooth motion, pulled the chair back just as her 4-legged body began its a descent towards sitting. What happened next occurred in the kind of slow motion that the brain reserves for car crashes and moments of pure, crystallized regret. Kira Vex, decorated combat veteran and warrior of the Zytharian High Command, crashed to the floor with all the grace of a meteor strike. Her 4 legs splayed at awkward angles, her tray launched forward in a perfect parabola, and her nutrient gel splattered across 3 tables and 2 innocent bystanders from species Marcus couldn't even name. The sound was tremendous, part crash, part screech of chitin on metal, part the specific noise that dignity makes when it dies publicly. The cafeteria went silent, not the comfortable silence of people eating lunch, but the aggressive silence of 200 witnesses who just watched someone commit what might technically be considered a war crime. Kira lay on the floor, covered in her own lunch, sensory antennae twitching with what Marcus's brain belatedly recognized as not amusement. Her 4 eyes focused on him, with the kind of attention that prey animals instinctively recognize as bad news. When she spoke, her voice came out in the clicking, harmonic language of her people, which the station's translators helpfully rendered as, "You have challenged my honor before witnesses. Explain yourself before I separate your head from your body." Marcus's brain, finally catching up to the situation, supplied exactly one coherent thought. "Oh no. He began, which was not a strong opening for a diplomatic incident. It was just, back on Earth it's a joke? Like a funny thing we do to friends?" The translator struggled with the word joke in Zytharian context. It eventually settled on something that roughly meant ritualized humiliation for tribal dominance display. Kira's antennae went rigid. "You claim friendship while dishonoring me publicly. You mock my vigilance, question my combat readiness, and insult my bloodline with this joke? No. I didn't mean security to Central Cafeteria," the station's AI announced in its eternally calm voice. "Diplomatic incident in progress. ALL personnel maintain distance." Within 90 seconds, the cafeteria had been cleared except for Marcus, Kira, who was now standing at her full intimidating height, and 4 security drones that had positioned themselves in a defensive perimeter. Within 5 minutes, Ambassador Threx of Zythar materialized via holographic projection, his expression suggesting someone had just informed him that his entire planet was on fire. "Lieutenant Vex," he said carefully, in the tone of someone trying to talk down a nuclear weapon, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There is nothing to discuss privately that was not done publicly," Kira responded, her 4 arms crossing in a gesture that transcended species barriers to universally mean, "I am extremely angry. This human has issued challenge. By the codes of my ancestors and the honor of my bloodline, I must respond." Ambassador Rodriguez of Earth appeared via hologram approximately 30 seconds later, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the time it took to establish connection. Marcus Chen, please tell me you didn't do what the incident report says you did." Marcus, who'd been standing frozen in the kind of paralyzed terror usually reserved for people who just realized they'd walked into a tiger enclosure, managed to squeak out, "I pulled her chair." Rodriguez closed her eyes, took a breath. Open them. You pulled her chair. As a joke. As a joke. I didn't know it was. That touching another species without permission is prohibited under consortium law? That Zytharians consider furniture sabotage a direct challenge to ritual combat? That we literally just finished a 6-hour seminar on cross-species interaction protocols last month? Marcus's silence was answer enough. Ambassador Threx's hologram turned to address Kira. Lieutenant, surely we can resolve this through diplomatic channels. The human clearly acted from ignorance, not malice. Ignorance does not erase insult, Kira responded. Her lower right hand moved to tap a communication device on her wrist. I am formally invoking Kresh'tar. Let it be witnessed and recorded. Rodriguez's hologram went very still. Ambassador Threx, she can't be serious. I am entirely serious, Kira said. The human has questioned my honor. By the ancient codes of my people, only combat can restore balance. I challenge Marcus Chen to Kresh'tar. Single combat, no weapons, no armor. We fight until one cannot continue. Or until one is dead, Threx added quietly. Ambassador Rodriguez, I am deeply sorry. The Kresh'tar is sacred to our people. Once invoked before witnesses, it cannot be withdrawn without bringing dishonor to Lieutenant Vex's entire family line. The challenge must be answered. Marcus, who'd been following this conversation with mounting horror, found his voice. Wait. Combat to the death? Over a chair? Over honor. Kira corrected. The chair is merely the vehicle of your disrespect. Can I just apologize? Profusely? Maybe buy you dinner for a year? Do community service. You can face me in the arena, or you can refuse and bring eternal shame to your species' first generation in the consortium. Kira's antennae twitched. Choose. Rodriguez's face had gone through several colors and settled on a pale gray that suggested she was rapidly calculating whether one maintenance technician was worth a diplomatic crisis. Marcus, don't answer yet. Ambassador Threx, surely there's some precedent. There is one option, Threx said slowly. Consortium Charter, Section 7. Subsection 42. In cases of interspecies honor challenges, the accused may request preparation time. 1 standard galactic week to train and prepare for combat. 1 week to fight a warrior race with 4 arms and armor plating, Marcus said flatly. Great. Fantastic. That totally evens the odds. It is customary, Threx continued, ignoring Marcus's sarcasm, to allow this time for the challenged party to make peace with their deities and family. You mean to prepare for death? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Rodriguez's hologram leaned forward. We're taking the week. Marcus, you're confined to quarters pending the Kresh'tar. I'll contact Earth Command and see what resources we can allocate. Resources for what? Teaching me to fight something that evolved to eat tanks. Resources for keeping you alive, you absolute idiot. The next 7 days established themselves as the longest of Marcus's life, which was statistically likely to be a very short life. He was confined to a small quarters suite in the human section of Helix 9, with guards posted outside not to keep him in but to keep curious aliens from placing bets on his survival. The galactic betting pools had opened within hours of the challenge, becoming public knowledge. Current odds had Marcus dying in the first 30 seconds at 500 to 1, making it to 5 minutes at 10,000 to 1, and actually winning at odds the betting algorithms literally couldn't calculate because the number approached infinity. Ambassador Rodriguez visited on day 1, accompanied by a woman who introduced herself as Colonel Sarah Rains, Earth Defense Forces Special Operations. Rains had the look of someone who'd seen some things, done some things, and generally didn't approve of things. Let me be clear, Rains said, sitting across from Marcus in his quarters. You're probably going to die. Zytharians are apex predators that turned warfare into an art form before humanity figured out agriculture. Lieutenant Vex has 12 years of combat experience, military augmentation, and an exoskeleton that can stop bullets. You have. What exactly? A really good sense of spatial reasoning? Marcus offered weakly. I'm excellent at Tetris. Fantastic. We'll list that on your 1 Tombstone. Rains pulled up a holographic display. But Earth doesn't abandon its people, even when those people do spectacularly stupid things. We've got 1 week to give you something resembling a fighting chance. It won't be much of one, but it's better than nothing. Over the next 6 days, Marcus received the most intensive training of his life from a rotating cast of instructors who all shared one common trait. They looked at him like he was already dead. The first instructor was a Valorian named Ket, whose species resembled 7-foot praying mantises with an obsession for martial arts philosophy. Ket moved like water and struck like lightning, and spent 8 hours explaining to Marcus why trying to match Kira for strength was suicide. "You cannot win with force," Ket said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into something resembling a disappointed teacher. "You are soft where she is hard, slow where she is fast, weak where she is strong. Every advantage belongs to her." "This is really motivational," Marcus muttered. "You should write greeting cards." "However," Ket continued, ignoring him, "you have one advantage she does not expect." "What's that?" "You are unpredictable because you are desperate. Use it." Colonel Rains took over physical conditioning, putting Marcus through exercises that would have killed him if not for the station's medical staff standing by with stimulants and cellular repair nanobots. She taught him how to fall without breaking bones, how to roll with impacts, how to protect vital organs. "You're not trying to win a fight," she explained during a particularly brutal sparring session. "You're trying to survive one. Every second you stay alive is a second something might change. Tire her out. Frustrate her. Make her angry enough to make mistakes." "How do I make a trained warrior make mistakes?" Rains smiled grimly. "You be so annoying, she stops thinking straight." The third instructor was a Zytharian scientist named Dr. Quellis, whose gaseous form shimmered inside a containment suit as he displayed Zytharian anatomy on holographic projections. His species had been studying xenobiology for 3,000 years, and he approached Marcus's survival problem like a particularly interesting puzzle. "Fascinating species, Zytharians," Quellis said, highlighting various organ systems. 4-chambered circulatory system, redundant neural pathways, chitinous exoskeleton composed of carbon nanotube analogs. Essentially, they're biological tanks. This is less helpful than you think. "Ah, but every tank has weak points." Quellis zoomed in on the sensory antennae. "These are extraordinarily sensitive. Too much stimulation causes disorientation." And here, he indicated the joint between leg segments, minimal armor plating to allow flexibility. A sufficiently precise strike could cause temporary mobility issues. How precise? Within 2 millimeters, accounting for movement and defensive posturing. So impossible. For most species, yes, but humans have remarkable hand-eye coordination. It's how you became apex predators, despite being essentially hairless prey animals. Use it. By day 5, Marcus had developed something that charitably could be called a strategy and realistically should be called a desperate gamble. He would be fast, annoying, and target weak points while avoiding direct engagement. It was the tactical equivalent of being a mosquito fighting a bear. You couldn't win, but you could definitely be irritating. "This is the worst combat strategy I've ever seen," Rains admitted during their final session. "It's completely without honor, dignity, or any recognizable martial arts principle. But will it work? Maybe for 30 seconds. After that, you're going to get tired, and she's going to get lucky, and that'll be that." She paused. "But it's 30 seconds more than I thought you'd get, so there's that." Ambassador Rodriguez visited on the evening before the Kresh'tar, looking exhausted. "I tried everything, called in favors, invoked obscure protocols, even suggested we could relocate you to a black site somewhere in the Oort cloud. The Zytharian High Command won't budge, Kira won't withdraw. You fight tomorrow, or Earth's reputation in the consortium is finished before it started." "No pressure though," Marcus said. "I'm sorry, Marcus. This shouldn't have happened. We should have better cultural training, better protocols, better." She stopped. "I'm sorry. Not your fault, I'm an idiot." "No, but you're our idiot, so try not to die too quickly. It'll look bad for the species." The arena had been constructed in the station's largest open space, a spherical chamber typically used for zero-G cargo transfer. For the Kresh'tar, they'd installed a circular platform 50 meters in diameter, suspended in the center with viewing galleries arranged around it in a sphere. Every species on the station had sent representatives. Some were genuinely interested in the combat. Most were there to watch what everyone assumed would be a brief and educational demonstration of why you don't insult Zytharian honor. Marcus entered first, wearing simple athletic clothing because armor was prohibited, and he'd figured he might as well be comfortable for his own execution. The crowd made various species-specific sounds of interest, pity, or amusement. He tried not to think about how many beings had bet against him. Then Kira Vex entered, and the crowd went silent. She wore ceremonial combat attire, minimal plating that enhanced rather than concealed her natural armor, ritual markings painted across her exoskeleton in bioluminescent compounds, and an expression that suggested she was looking forward to this. Her forearms flexed, her antennae swept the arena. She looked, Marcus thought distantly, like death had taken a body just for the occasion. An arbiter, a species Marcus didn't recognize. Basically a floating crystal that projected, an authority announced the rules in 16 languages simultaneously. No weapons. No outside interference. Combat continues until one party yields or cannot continue. The Kresh'tar would be recorded and transmitted to the Zytharian High Command, as required by tradition. "Do you have final words?" the arbiter asked Marcus. "I really didn't mean to insult anyone." Noted. "Lieutenant Vex? I fight with honor for my bloodline and ancestors. Let this human learn the cost of mockery. The Kresh'tar begins. Now." Marcus ran. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't noble. It was pure, distilled survival instinct overriding every other thought in his brain. He sprinted to the edge of the platform, juked left, and kept moving as Kira charged after him with the inevitability of a freight train. The crowd made confused noises. This wasn't how honor combat typically went. "Face me," Kira demanded, pursuing on her four legs with a speed that should have been illegal. "Hard pass," Marcus shouted back, vaulting over a structural support and changing direction. This continued for approximately 45 seconds. Marcus running, dodging, and generally refusing to engage like some kind of panicked gazelle, while Kira chased him with increasing frustration. It wasn't dignified. It wasn't honorable. It was, however, keeping him alive. "This is pathetic," Kira roared. "You dishonor the challenge itself." "Yeah, well, I dishonored a chair, so we're establishing patterns here." Marcus ducked under a swing from her upper arms, rolled, and came up on the opposite side of the platform. In the viewing galleries, Ambassador Rodriguez was gripping the rail hard enough to leave marks. "What is he doing?" "Tactical cowardice," Colonel Rains observed. "It's actually not stupid. He can't beat her in a straight fight, so he's refusing to have one. The Zytharians are going to riot. Probably. But he's still alive." On the arena floor, Marcus was learning something interesting. Kira was fast in straight lines, but took time to change direction. Those four legs and low center of gravity made her stable, but not particularly agile. He filed this information away in the part of his brain labeled "Maybe you won't die." "You cannot run forever, human. Watch me." Marcus feinted right, went left, and actually managed to land a glancing blow on her antennae as she passed. Kira shrieked a sound that made every human in the viewing gallery instinctively want to find somewhere else to be and stumbled. The antennae, as Dr. Quellis had explained, were extraordinarily sensitive. Hitting them was like someone ringing a bell directly inside your skull. Marcus didn't wait for her to recover. He kept moving, kept circling, kept being as annoying as physically possible. When Kira charged, he dodged. When she tried to corner him, he went vertical, using the platform's support structures to climb and drop. He talked constantly, a running commentary of sarcasm and improvised apologies. "Really sorry about the chair thing. Swing. Miss. I'll buy you a new chair. A really nice one. Charge. Dodge. We could be friends. Humans and Zytharians, united in furniture safety." This was, objectively, The worst combat strategy in recorded history. It was also working, at least in the sense that Marcus had survived for almost 3 minutes, which was longer than anyone had bet on. Kira was getting angry. Not regular angry incandescent, seeing red, forget your training angry. Every dodge, every stupid comment, every refusal to fight properly was an additional insult to her honor. She'd expected quick, brutal combat. She'd gotten a comedy routine with her as the straight man. Stand still. That seems counterproductive for me. She charged with all 4 arms extended, meaning to grab and crush him in one decisive move. It was a veteran's technique, overwhelming force applied with precision. It was also a mistake. Marcus dropped flat. Not rolled, not dodged, just dropped like someone had cut his strings. Kira's momentum carried her forward, 4 arms grasping at air, directly toward the platform's edge barrier. The impact wasn't hard enough to injure her exoskeleton, handled worse on a daily basis, but it was off balance, awkward, and in front of several hundred witnesses. She stumbled, caught herself on 3 legs, and struggled to rise. Marcus, lying on his back, breathing like he'd run a marathon, stared at her vulnerable form. This was it. According to Colonel Raines's briefing, Zytharian combat doctrine prohibited striking a downed opponent. It was considered deeply dishonorable. But technically, Kira wasn't down, just unbalanced. He could probably land a hit, maybe even a decisive one, on those unarmored joints Dr. Quellis had highlighted. The arena held its breath. Every instinct screamed at Marcus to do something, anything to capitalize on this advantage. Colonel Raines was probably shouting tactical advice he couldn't hear over his own pulse. Ambassador Rodriguez was likely calculating whether a cheap shot would be diplomatically acceptable. But Marcus Chen, maintenance technician and demonstrably poor decision-maker, did something else entirely. He stood up, walked over, and extended his hand to Kira. The gesture was purely human, an offer of assistance, a sign of respect, a movement that in Earth cultures meant, "Let me help you." It was also, technically, another instance of the physical contact that had started this whole mess. The crowd lost its collective mind. The noise in the viewing galleries reached levels that triggered audio dampeners. The betting pools crashed as algorithms tried to process what was happening. Kira Vex, decorated warrior, looked at the extended hand. 4 eyes focused on this human who'd spent 3.5 minutes being the most irritating opponent she'd ever faced, who dodged and talked and refused to fight properly, who'd just passed up an opportunity to maybe win, and was now offering help. Her antennae twitched. Then, slowly, she reached up with her upper right hand and took his. Marcus hauled her up well. She mostly got herself up, and he just provided a token pull, but the gesture counted. They stood facing each other, breathing hard, covered in sweat and chitin dust respectively. "I declare the Kresh'tar satisfied," Kira said formally. The translator struggled with the words, eventually settling on something that meant roughly, "Honor has been served through unexpected means." "Wait, what?" Marcus said intelligently. "You have shown courage, annoying, frustrating, dishonorable courage, but courage nonetheless." Her antennae straightened. "You could have struck me while I was vulnerable. Instead, you offered assistance. This is confusing." "Yeah, I get that a lot. But it is also the action of someone who values life over victory. There is honor in that, even if your tactics were those of a coward." "I'll take it." Ambassador Threx's hologram materialized at platform edge. "This is highly irregular, but not unprecedented," Kira countered. "Ancient texts speak of challenges satisfied through displays of character rather than violence. I invoke the precedent of Kresh'tar the Wise, who ended a death duel by recognizing courage in unexpected forms. That precedent is 4,000 years old. Does that make it less valid?" Threx appeared to struggle with this. "No, but the High Command will have questions. The High Command can ask them. I have declared satisfaction. The Kresh'tar is ended." The arena erupted again, this time in confusion rather than bloodlust. Marcus stood there, not quite processing that he was alive, still holding Kira's hand in what had become the galaxy's most awkward handshake. "So," he said eventually, "we good? You will buy my lunches for 6 months." That's fair. And you will never pull anyone's chair again. Also fair. And you will stop sweating on my hand. Marcus let go quickly. Sorry. The next 3 days involved more diplomatic paperwork than Marcus had seen in his entire life. The Zytharian High Command reviewed the Kresh'tar recording approximately 47 times, held 16 hours of deliberation, and eventually issued a statement that translated roughly to, "We're not happy about this, but technically everything was legal." Marcus became accidentally famous. The human who survived Kresh'tar through tactical cowardice became his unofficial title, which various species found either hilarious or deeply troubling, depending on their cultural values. Someone made a holographic recording of the fight that went viral across 6 star systems. A Valorian martial arts academy added the Chen maneuver to their curriculum, though they called it strategic disengagement because running away while talking trash didn't sound sufficiently academic. Lieutenant Kira Vex received both commendation and criticism from military leadership. Commendation for upholding honor protocols. Criticism for not crushing the human in under a minute like everyone expected. She handled both with the same stoic dignity, though Marcus noticed she started eating lunch in different locations to avoid the cafeteria's notoriety. The Galactic Consortium updated its first contact protocols to include a specific section on human practical jokes, with detailed explanations, holographic examples, and a warning system color-coded by diplomatic severity. Pulling chairs was designated code red, do not ever. Ambassador Rodriguez sent Marcus a bottle of bourbon with a note that read, "For teaching me more about xenodiplomacy in 1 week than I learned in 10 years at Academy. Never do anything like this again. Love, Rodriguez." P.S. You're paying for sensitivity training. Marcus returned to his maintenance duties, though now with a reputation that preceded him. Engineers from other species would occasionally ask him to explain his tactics, and he'd have to disappoint them by admitting there weren't really tactics, just panic and improvisation. Colonel Rains sent him a commendation letter that was mostly sarcastic, but included a genuine note of respect for not dying like we all expected. 6 months later, Marcus was in the cafeteria, the same cafeteria where everything started, eating lunch at a table by the viewing ports. He'd become hyper-aware of furniture stability, checking every chair multiple times before sitting. Trauma came in many forms. Lieutenant Kira approached his table, carrying a tray. Marcus tensed instinctively. "Relax, human," she said, sitting across from him with perfect 4-legged stability. "Your debt is paid. I may even say your company has become tolerable. That's the nicest thing a warrior race has ever said to me. Do not let it inflate your ego. You are still an idiot who makes poor decisions." "I'm aware." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual multilingual chaos. Someone from a species Marcus didn't recognize was arguing about physics in the corner. A Valorian was doing that meditation thing where they vibrated slightly and unnerved everyone nearby. "I have been thinking," Kira said eventually, "about why you helped me rise in the arena." "Yeah?" "It was illogical. You had advantage, however slight. Any strategic thinking would say to press that advantage. Maybe I'm just not strategic. Or perhaps," Kira's antennae tilted thoughtfully, "humans have a different calculation for advantage. One that includes factors my people do not traditionally consider. Like not being a jerk?" Crudely put, but essentially correct. She finished her meal, stood. "This is why the consortium accepted your species despite your many, many flaws. You calculate costs differently. We also hug a lot. Yes, that remains disturbing, but perhaps less than it was." Kira walked away, leaving Marcus to finish his sandwich and contemplate the strange turns his life had taken. 8 months ago, he'd been a maintenance technician worried about air filter specifications. Now he was accidentally a diplomat who'd changed 4,000-year-old precedents by being too stupid to know when to take advantage. A new technician fresh from Earth, maybe 3 days on station, sat at a nearby table. Marcus watched as a multi-limbed alien approached the adjacent seat. He saw the new technician's hand twitch toward the chair, that familiar mischievous look crossing their face. Marcus moved faster than he'd moved during the Kresh'tar, launching himself across 2 tables and 3 very surprised aliens, tackling the new technician before they could complete the motion. "Don't," he gasped, sprawled across the startled human. "Don't touch the chair, trust me, just don't." The alien sat down normally, completely oblivious to the diplomatic incident they'd narrowly avoided. The new technician stared at Marcus like he'd lost his mind. "Dude, what? Long story. Buy you a drink, and I'll explain why you need to keep your hands to yourself for the next 1,000 years." Somewhere in the viewing gallery, Ambassador Rodriguez was probably watching on security feeds, adding another note to Marcus's file. Somewhere on Zythar, military academies were analyzing his tactics. Somewhere in the Galactic Consortium's endless bureaucracy, someone was updating protocols again, but in the cafeteria of Helix 9, Marcus Chen successfully prevented another interstellar incident, which was either character growth or just more evidence that experience was what you got right after you needed it. Either way, he was alive, employed, and remarkably more careful about furniture interactions. The universe, in its infinite irony, had taught him a lesson about physical boundaries by almost killing him for touching a chair. Somewhere, surely, a cosmic narrator was laughing at the absurdity. Marcus chose to believe that narrator had a good sense of humor and wouldn't pull his chair. Then again, the universe had surprised him before. He made a mental note to check his seating arrangements very, very carefully from now on.